So I just think it's like worth pointing that out, that I think that part of the story got overhyped.
It's hard to know what's fact and what's fiction. Everybody who's on the outside guessing has their own incentive, right? Like, so if you're a semiconductor analyst that effectively is massively bullish Nvidia, you want it to be true that it wasn't possible to train on $6 million. Obviously, if you're the person that makes an alternative that's that disruptive, you want it to be true that it was trained on $6 million. All of that, I think, is all speculation. The thing that struck me was how different their approach was. And TK just mentioned this, but if you dig into not just the original white paper of DeepSeek, but they've also published some subsequent papers that have refined some of the details. I do think that this is a case, and Sachs, you can tell me if you disagree, but this is a case where necessity was the mother of invention. So I'll give you two examples where I just read these things and I was like, man, these guys are like really clever. The first is, as you said, let's put in a pin on whether they distilled O1, which we can talk about in a second. But at the end of the day, these guys were like, well, how am I going to do this reinforcement learning thing? They invented a totally different algorithm. There was the orthodoxy, right? This thing called PPO that everybody used. And they were like, no, we're going to use something else called, I think it's called GRPO or something. It uses a lot less computer memory and it's highly performant. So maybe they were constrained, Sachs, practically speaking, by some amount of compute that caused them to find this, which you may not have found if you had just a total surplus of compute availability. And then the second thing that was crazy is everybody is used to building models and compiling through CUDA, which is NVIDIA's proprietary language, which I've said for a couple times is their biggest moat, but it's also the biggest threat vector for lock-in. And these guys worked totally around CUDA, and they did something called PTX, which goes right to the bare metal. And it's controllable, and it's effectively like writing assembly. Now, the only reason I'm bringing these up is we, meaning the West, with all the money that we've had, didn't come up with these ideas. And I think part of why we didn't come up is not that we're not smart enough to do it, but we weren't forced to because the constraints didn't exist. And so I just wonder how we make sure we learn this principle. Meaning, when the AI company wakes up and rolls out of bed and some VC gives them $200 million, maybe that's not the right answer for a Series A or a seed. And maybe the right answer is 2 million so that they do these DeepSeek-like innovations.
Constraint makes for great art. What do you think, Friedberg, when you're looking at this?
Well, I think it also enables a new class of investment opportunity. Given the low cost and the speed, it really highlights that maybe the opportunity to create value doesn't really sit at that level in the value chain, but further upstream. Balaji made a comment on Twitter today that was pretty funny, or I think reflects this.
About the rapper?
Yeah, he's like, turns out the rapper may be the
the moat.
The moat, like, which is true. At the end of the day, if model performance continues to improve, get cheaper, and it's so competitive that it commoditizes much faster than anyone even thought, then the value is going to be created somewhere else in the value chain. Maybe it's not the wrapper. Maybe it's with the user. And maybe, by the way, here's an important point. Maybe it's further in the economy. You know, when electricity production took off in the United States, it's not like the companies are making a lot of money that are making all the electricity. It's the rest of the economy that accrues a lot of the value.
Well, you're about to see a big test of this, because if OpenAI raises $40 billion at $340 billion, that
100%.
Just hit the wire. The underwriting logic at $340 billion, exactly what you just said, Friedberg, it is the wrapper, meaning ChatGPT is the next killer app. It's getting to 1 billion plus MAU, hundreds of millions of DAO.
It's competing for consumer usage. That's the model. That's the model, is like consumer usage.
Which puts them on a collision course with Meta. It's the only company that could really impact that, because the only company right now that has billions of eyeballs of DAUs per day. And by the way, Zuck said this in his earnings release. He's like, there's only going to be one company that brings AI to 1 billion plus people, and it will be us. Some version of that quote in his earnings release yesterday.
And then Microsoft showed weakness in their cloud. And then Microsoft's down 6% today. And, you know, I think it's a window for OpenAI to say, we're going to go up against Meta. This is it. We're going to be the players.
Chamath Palihapitiya recently went on the All In podcast and attempted to analyze the Nvidia stock after DeepSeek AI was unveiled. Chamath came to a very shocking conclusion about the stock, doing something that it has never done before, and it seems that DeepSeek was not the only factor in all of this. Let us take a deep dive into his analysis and what shocking truth it had uncovered about Nvidia. Welcome back to Investocracy.
What do you guys think is happening right now between OpenAI and Microsoft? Because if it's true that this distillation thing actually happened, well, there's only one place where you could have distilled the O1 model, and it's on Azure. So what the hell is going on over there?
Well, and their R1 is supported on...
Explain distillation real quick.
Yeah, so when you have a big, large parameter model, the way that you get to a smaller, more usable model along the lines of what Sachs mentioned is through this process called distillation, where the big model feeds the little model. So the little model is asking questions of the big model, and you take the answers and you refine. And by the way, you can see this. Nick, I sent you a clip. You guys can see this. I mean, there's clearly distillation happening. Nick, can you show the clip of the DeepSeek run where it shows the China answer and then deletes it? What was Winston's job in 1984, right? And it sort of starts to go through this whole summary. And then the person says, are there any actual states that currently do that? Hold on, here it goes. It says North Korea. Wait, it goes China. And then wait, watch this. Boom. So the reason why this is happening is like you're seeing this chain of thought. You're seeing the several layers, and then it's catching it after the fact. So we know that this is distilled from some other model. And my only point there, it's a little tongue-in-cheek, is right now, when you go and use OpenAI, you're using it sitting in an Azure instance somewhere, right? So this is Microsoft's cloud infrastructure that runs it. So it begs the question, it's not that it's O1's fault or OpenAI's fault that this distillation happened. And I'm not trying to assign blame, but typically if this were to happen, you'd look to your cloud provider and say, how are you letting this happen? And I don't think anybody's had a good answer for that.
Well, and the cloud provider is hosting R1 now. So they're literally undercutting ChatGPT and OpenAI at the same time.
Just to clean that up, they're hosting their own copy of it, right?
Yes.
Because R1's been
when
open
you say
source.
they, who are you referring to, Sachs?
Microsoft.
Yeah, Microsoft is hosting their version of R1, which means they are actively subverting their partner, OpenAI, and pushing people to a cheaper model.
Well, whatever. I mean, look, Amazon's going to host their own version of R1. Grok has a version of R1.
Yeah, we have one. Cerebrus just rolled out.
It's open source now.
You guys have a buddy who has
R1
on his laptop, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but if it was stolen as, and the IP was stolen as Sam is claiming, that would be like, you'd think he'd be able to call up Satya and say, hey, can you not put the stolen IP on your server and promote it to everybody at a lower cost? It just shows Microsoft has no loyalty to OpenAI. Yeah, and they have... But you'd think they would have loyalty. They have no loyalty.
What it would take to distill O1, like brute force, it wouldn't be like, oh, geez, I can't believe it was distilled. It would be like such a massive number of calls against an API or against something that it wouldn't be unnoticed.
They did actually came out and said they blocked some suspicious activity recently.
In the wake of DeepSeek's announcement, Nvidia's stock experienced a notable downturn, capturing the attention of market enthusiasts worldwide. Now, if one were to recount Nvidia's recent stock performance, it would resemble a roller coaster rather than a steady ascent. Historically, when Nvidia's forward price-to-earnings ratio hovered around 30, the company was at a market cap of around $1.5 trillion, half of what it is today. Yet here we are, with Nvidia's value soaring, matched consistently by an unwavering forward PE, hinting at a robust earnings forecast in Wall Street's eyes. But before going on with the video, are you into cryptocurrency? If so, check out our second channel, Investocracy Crypto. We bring you breaking news, expert analysis, and the latest trends in the fast-moving world of digital assets. Whether you're a seasoned crypto investor or just curious about the future of finance, we've got something for you. Click the link in the description to subscribe to Investocracy Crypto now. Don't miss out and stay ahead of the game. Now, let's get back to the video.
By the way, you have to be sympathetic, I think, to OpenAI in this, because if you're building a startup, you're trying to raise money. We've all gone through this cycle, guys, where it's like there's momentum. We celebrate internally the momentum. That's what gets you the energy to push your team even further and harder. And then all of a sudden, it turns out that some portion of that, like Travis said it well, like there's probably a chart inside of OpenAI's offices where you're showing how many times these APIs are getting hit, right? How many times these endpoints are getting hit. It all looks positive, and then you realize that some portion of it was actually bad and trying to undercut your value. It's a hard pill to swallow, and then you have to course correct very quickly. You have to lock down. This is one area where
security.
Exactly. We have not talked about this. Like, you have to lock these models down. Now you have to lock the endpoints down. Look, in the Biden administration, if this had happened, the first conversation would have been, we need to KYC the people that use these models. And it's like, what are you talking about? We don't KYC the cloud. If you're trying to use like an EC2 endpoint or an S3 bucket, you don't have to all of a sudden prove who you are. You just use a credit card and go. That's the whole point of why proliferation can happen so quickly. But if we take the wrong takeaways from this period, there's going to be a bunch of people that'll clamor to like lock these folks down and make innovation go much slower. I think that would be bad.
Here's the other side, and totally agree, Chamath, but here's the other side. You go through the white paper, you see what it is they did, what they innovated on, the science behind it, the thoroughness, and you're like, these guys are badass. It does not feel or sound like somebody who took something just when you get through it. It could be that OpenAI wrote the white paper for them, just putting it out there. But it's real innovative.
I agree with that.
Real innovation, strong tech. You're like, this is legit.
I agree with that.
But in that paper, they're very hazy about where the data is coming from. And they're fairly transparent about everything else they did, but they're not really clear about the data. And specifically, they say that to get from V3, which is the base model, to R1, which is the reasoning model, they had about 800,000 samples of reasoning. They were quite unclear about where those reasoning samples came from. By the way, it is remarkable that you can get from a base model to an R1 with just 800,000 samples.
But this is the problem. Like, we, meaning like the Western AI community, we've been trudging around on this path where we had a very orthodoxical approach. The only way you can do reinforcement learning is through PPO. Okay, but is that true? And it turns out that if you're like a really smart team that has no other choice, you move away and you invent your way out of it. And so we have to get that example too. I think it's technically brilliant, some of the things they've done, but they also use constraint as very much a feature, not a bug. And the Western AI economy has been the opposite so far.
I think the best part of this is the fact that Sam Altman was supposed to be doing open source. He made it a closed source company. He stole everybody's data. He got caught red-handed. He's being sued by the New York Times for all that. And now the Chinese have come and open sourced all the stuff he stole. And he's got a real competitor on the original mission of what OpenAI was supposed to do. So I have zero sympathy for him or the team over there. I'm glad that this is all going open source. It should have been open source, and it's better for humanity. And the fact that the Chinese did it to Sam Altman is comeuppance for him stealing everybody else's content. That's my feeling.
Okay, there you have it.
But I don't have strong opinions on it.
However, the smoothness of stocks belies the potential ripples initiated by DeepSeek. As analysts scramble to reevaluate their earnings projections for Nvidia, the moot question becomes, what does this mean for Nvidia's GPU dominance, especially in the context of evolving AI infrastructure demands? While history offers a sentiment of Nvidia's potential to double its value again this year, the astute investor must tread cautiously. But before going any further, if you made it this far into the video, thank you. These videos take a lot of effort and time to make, so if you enjoyed them, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. This goes a long way in helping us grow. That said, back to the video.
Meta has to embrace and extend everything that these guys have shown, meaning like Meta's buying tens of thousands of NVIDIA GPUs. Great. But what did this show? This shows that actually CUDA, high-level languages in general, I think we've all known that they suck, okay? And so we've all been going through it thinking that it's like the right thing to do. DeepSeek throws it out the window. They use something called PTX. What does Meta do is critical now to understand. They need to embrace this stuff. And this is where I think, again, apologies to the NVIDIA bulls, but it's going to create a more heterogeneous environment. And the reason is because there's too much money and risk on the line to go through a single point of failure. A chip, a high-level framework to get to that chip, that's nuts. So I think like that kind of like emperor has no clothes moment is upon us.
Currently, Nvidia retains its position as a frontrunner in AI technology, yet shifts and adaptations are constant in this rapidly advancing sector. The stock market, much like a story unfolding, is filled with surprises, some exhilarating and others cautionary. As you ponder this intriguing conundrum, we'd love to hear your thoughts. What is your take on Nvidia's future in the AI tech landscape? Finally, if you would like to know what companies like Nvidia have been up to these past few days, go ahead and click on the next video on your screen. See you there.